I'm going to be talking about enrollment in clinical trials and really the ethical underpinnings for informed consent, trying to make sure that we are able to meet the mission of enrollment and to address the science, but in an ethical way. When you look at it, there's a balance between the enrollment and the protection of human subjects. And it's important that we acknowledge and really support the protection of human subjects or participants in research while trying to meet our research mission. So that's really the balance that I'm trying to present. So if you take a look from a historical perspective, 100, 150 years ago, science was small studies, wasn't very organized and all. And then over the early part of the 20th century, we got more and more organized. And then we had World War II, and there was a lot of experimentation on people that wasn't very good. Ended up in the Nuremberg trials, which we started having the ethical underpinnings of research. Now, one would hope that those mistakes would have taught us how to do things better, but unfortunately, no, we continue to be human, continue to make mistakes. And the next big event, if you will, was 1964 and the Helsinki Accords, again, trying to organize and systematize research subjects, ethics, and how to do consent, and how to take care of the human subjects protection. And then in the late 60s, early 70s in the United States, we had the discovery or the publication of what was called the Tuskegee syphilis study, in which there were a number of different ethical problems, which ended up in what's called the Belmont Report, which is the underpinnings of what we do in the United States, but it has had significant influence worldwide. And there are three key components to that. There's respect for persons, there's beneficence, and justice. And respect for persons, really, that's informed consent. You want to make sure people know what they're getting enrolled in and the different components. So there's a number of different components that would go with that. Justice is to make sure that if you're studying one population, they'll get benefit from that as well in terms of the product. If you're taking a medication and you study it in a low resource environment and then go and sell it for millions of dollars in a high resource environment, then the people who were placed at risk are not getting, it's not justice, they're not getting the benefit from that. And the last, and for me one of the most important components, is what's called beneficence, or the risk-benefit analysis. If we're putting people at risk to volunteer to work on our research programs, then we need to make sure that we're giving them as much benefit as possible. And now if it's a minimal risk, we're going to look at the research data, the medical records. That may be as simple as the benefit is for human society. There's really the risk of loss of confidentiality. But when you're talking about complex cancer studies or new medications, there's a much greater risk, and we want to make sure that there's the potential for direct benefit, ideally, for these individuals. Now, there's different levels of research, different phases of it, but really the most important thing is to consider that these individuals are volunteering to be part of our research, and we need to respect them for that, and we need to give them as much positive benefit from that research as possible. So in the end, when we look at these things, and there's a lot more history to research and the problems that we've seen over the years, but from my perspective as a researcher, I think it's very important to make sure that we acknowledge beneficence, justice, and respect for the individuals who are our participants. There's always challenges. There's challenges in high-income countries. There are challenges in low-income countries. And you can look at the challenges in a number of different ways. So some of the challenges are administrative. Are we getting the appropriate documentation? Are we getting the appropriate oversight? Are we, data safety monitoring board? So there's that. There's science components, which would be challenging anywhere in terms of what are the risks for the research and all. There's also within a low resource environment, how do we make sure that they're able to continue to get care after the research is done? So really respect for the individuals and respect for the community. There are no easy answers, and if you've seen one clinical trial successfully done, you've seen one clinical trial successfully done. And we can learn from that, but each one is different. And you have to acknowledge everything from the funding source to the regulatory environment within the country or the environment, the people that are involved, their level of knowledge. So it's a complex question that requires appropriate resources and appropriate and thoughtful consideration. No, I think, again, for me it's really important in the end that we really thank the individuals who are kind enough to participate in our research projects. They're volunteering their time, their effort, sometimes their lives for this research. And we want to make sure that we respect them for that and support them as much as possible.